In this episode, we've like traded every watch you've ever owned. We've traded a Daytona. We said we don't care about hand finished stuff. I think this is a sacrilegious episode. Is that what the title of this one's going to be?
No, it's just a man and his two watches. I think that's fair. Just a man and his two watches.
Just killed everything to
just
get
killed
here.
Everything to get here, right? So RJ, thank you for joining and coming to the
Pleasure,
show.
Sir.
If you can, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be here. You don't find too many people you can talk about this stuff about. But RJ, I got the name from work, when we first met. But overall, I've been into banking and finance for quite some time, hence RJ Financial and the whole, YouTube channel. I've also been a big watch fan for many, many years, which of course we're going to get into and tell you all the stories about it. But yeah, the high level, that's me. You want more info, we'll do shameless plugs later.
Fair enough. So why don't we start with this? I'm not going to open up the goodies that are in here. I'm going to leave the suspense there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where your watch journey actually started?
I think the first one was they had the GMT, the ceramic, the LN, all black one. I think I can't remember what I exactly traded in for that one, but I sold a few. I think I have still a few more bottles of this one, so I'm thinning out the old stuff. Okay. Trading up, and that was before Rolex was stupid expensive. I think used Rolex, I think I probably paid like $6,200 for that watch. So that was the next jump into Rolex.
And then from there, where do we go? Where do we go after that watch?
From there, it's amazing. Once you break a barrier, you write a check bigger than you ever thought you would for something silly. Then it gets like surprisingly easy. Right. And once that was done, I think from there, I was like, well, I want another. You don't want to not wear a Rolex. Who would want to do that, right? So I think I got an Explorer 1. The one where they updated it again to be 39, but they put the lume back on, the 369. I think that was an eBay pickup, probably 2016, 2017. Still, prices on used Rolex are great, so maybe $5,000 for that.
Now that watch is a lot of people, especially on YouTube and other channels, talk about how like the watch is so simplistic. And that's the struggle. Like in one breath, you're like, did I pay, X number of $1,000s for a watch that's so simple? And then people begin to kind of gravitate to love it and kind of appreciate it. How was your experience with that watch?
On one hand, it's so clean when you look at it. It's matte black dial. This is the shirt I always wear. I love the black dial. But on the other hand, to your point, it's boring, which is probably going to offend some people in the comments. You can at me, it's okay. I will respond. Be nice. No, they can at me, it's fine. But compared to the GMT, which again we established for the Active Terra, I like polished center links. I like the sportiness of it. I need a date function, also controversial, but I need the date. And the GMT was more. There was a time when I was going into banking where I was like, I'm going to be the guy who flies all over the place, right?
Right.
Didn't really work out that way. Not very popular at other companies, believe it or not. But at the time, the GMT was like that in my mind. That's who I was and who I wanted to be. So that fit. And the Explorer is more the casual watch. But I ended up getting bored of that. And you're noticing a theme. It did not last.
It did not last.
It did not last. You remember when the Daytona came out, the ceramic one, right? So I think I got caught up in the hype, to be honest. I think it's a beautiful watch. But then after a while, I was like, I want one of these. Never saw it in person. But that was when they were trading for around, they retailed for 11 or 12?
Yeah.
And they were trading for maybe 14, 50, which is insane today, because now I think you can $30,000, something stupid like that. So I think I put together a trade with a gray market guy I think I sold the Speedmaster on eBay again, and I traded the Explorer and wrote another big check and got the Daytona, the black one, of course.
I actually remember that because I was in the office, you came around the corner, and I don't know if you handed it to me or if you just reached out your shoulder, and I was like, dude, what the heck is that?
Made it happen.
And then I was like, give that here, and snatched off your wrist, and obviously take a look at it. But what was interesting, and would probably piss a couple other people off, is that I tried it on my wrist. I looked at it and I was like, man, it looks small, right?
It's small. Rolex is like an 18, 19-year-old boy. They lights always 2 or 3 inches bigger than every time. Every time. And I know they have it listed as a 40. Mm-hmm. It's not. I've never taken calipers to it. I'm not that serious, but when you wear it, I think it's partly because I grew up in the era of Movado and Oakley. All watches were 42 millimeters or bigger and had dates. So when you give me something small like the Explorer, even the Aquaterra to an extent, it doesn't feel right. Even though I have small wrists.
Right. Now, I've got to ask this question because I always wondered, when you go show your watch, your next prized possession to a friend, right, or someone that you kind of regard a little bit in terms of their opinion, I always wondered, was I a little bit of the cause that made you start rethinking that watch, being that, 5 minutes in, I was like, man, it really wears kind of small.
I think you waited for me to say, like, you tested the waters, like, to see what I was going to say. I remember that. But now I held on to it. Like, clearly, we're trying to nosing trend. And that's a cliffhanger. If you sold a Daytona, what could be in here?
Right.
But now, because on one hand, it still looks amazing, right?
Yeah, no, hands down. Hands down.
I would say that with all the other watches I've had, I would have kept them all if I could make it all happen financially, but you can't.
Yeah.
And so that one had to go. But no, I don't think you pushed me over. I think it was just, I preferred wearing the GMT the most. Like, even, I tend to wear the same watch during the week and put on a different one during the weekend. But I wanted to wear the GMT all the time over the Daytona, which is, again, crazy to some folks, but I think that's what pushed me over. And it's only, they're supposed to be both 40 millimeters, but it was a huge difference.
Yeah. Speaking of that, it makes me think of a story that you and I had, which was my biggest oversight to date as it relates to the journey of collecting watches for Rolex. So you were prepared to sell me your GMT Rolex, right? This is the green arrow hand GMT, right? Full box, papers, everything. Do you remember how much you were going to sell it to me for?
I think I was going to sell it to you for like almost what I paid for.
For cost?
It was like 6.5.
It was like 6.5, right? Yeah. I was wavering, struggling, trying to figure out if I was ready to do it, not quite sure, kept trying it on. I closed my eyes. This is the way I tell the story. I closed my eyes. You sell the watch for how much?
Oh, I think I got close to $8,000.
Like $8,000?
Yeah,
something
traded it to a dealer.
Yeah, to a dealer. And you use that to then go and get what?
That gets us into the roll here, but that got us into the Sea Dweller. The anniversary one.
The anniversary.
That one came, the other one in there came first.
Okay. All right. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and open it up. We've tortured the audience. We have 2 of the most highly sought after watches in Rolex right now in terms of sports steel model Rolexes. We've got the Sky Dweller Black Dial on Oyster bracelet, and then we have the 50th anniversary. Right? Tell us a little bit about, first, tell us a little bit about how we landed on 2 watches when over time you went through that journey of swapping and trading out. You've had multiple watches. These right now are the only 2 watches in your collection, correct?
Yes.
And we've talked about this a lot. It's fair to say that these are the only 2 watches and you don't really have a desire to add more watches to the collection. Why is that?
Well, I run out of money is the quick answer. I've also ran out of, we'll talk about how I got the Sky Dweller in a second, but to get here has always been trading up, right? Throwing a few pieces plus some more money. I don't have anything else to trade, so it would be what do you trade up into to the next piece. But as far as I am a watch enthusiast. Some people can let me know in the comments if they what constitutes a collector versus not.
Right.
But I think you land on what you like. It works, and it's not lost on me the amount of money you have sitting in a watch roll. I don't talk about it much on the channel because we focus on credit cards, but I do like real estate. And you talk about this is a down payment for your next house. So adding another one gets really expensive.
Even in that point, though, we know that. You purchased these before the hype.
I did.
Before the, craziness of multiple gray market dealers introducing themselves into the watch industry, the whole interesting mystery that is Rolex and why they are not able to produce enough units to satisfy the demand. So we're talking about back in the day when this was coming in at just shy of $15,000.
Yep.
And I want to say this one was coming in just shy of $13,000.
Yeah, that one with Sky Dweller was a trade. It might upset some people. The Sea Dweller was at the point where you had to go, it would no longer make sense to go secondary or gray market, but you could still walk into an AD, and because it's bigger, it was controversial, they put the Cyclops back on it, you could still get on the list for it. So that was at retail.
And so at the time that you were actually purchasing this watch, how long were you on a list, or was this simply you were still able to walk into a store, turn in some pieces, and go, yeah, I'll take that one?
For the Sea Dweller?
No, for the Sky Dweller.
Okay, well, the Sky Dweller, I didn't actually try to go into any dealers. I have no real AD relationship or anything like that. We were sitting around. I had the Daytona for a while. We talked about. I don't really wear it much. I love to look at it, but I don't really wear it much. Or I wear it because I know I have it and you should wear it.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a thought. I was like, can I just trade a Daytona straight up for a Sky Dweller? So I called up a few different dealers. The closest I found was a guy that, you give me the Daytona plus $400, which seemed like, really, you need $400? I mean, Sky Dweller already retails for more than Daytona, but again, they weren't going crazy yet. So I did that trade. Got the Sky Dweller, and sight unseen, hadn't seen one in person before, but I remember when the original Sky Dweller in 2012 came out, just the solid gold ones. I loved it then, but no one's paying like $40,000.
So what does the Sky Dweller say to you when you put it on the wrist? I mean, like, it's interesting because I would say, and I'm embellishing a little bit, but I almost feel like the Sky Dweller is still a little bit controversial, right? Some people feel like it's too much of a mixed bag, right? It still feels like glorified Datejust, right? And then you've got the most complicated movement that Rolex has ever made in here. Some people feel like it's too flashy, it's too big. But when you put it on the wrist and said, hey, I'm willing to trade up, if you will, from a Daytona to this piece, what did you see that drew your connection? What about the watch just made you say, this is the one to put on the wrist?
As soon as I put it on, I knew, because we were still, you can't ever try these things on, which is really an underrated thing, of just being able to go try something on. But as soon as I put it on, I knew like this was it. I mean, as they say, we have a lot of boxes checked.
We've talked a lot about how, you know, and I won't torture the audience on my on my Rolex journey, but I torture you quite a bit on it. And I actually landed on the Sky Dweller white dial, but on Jubilee as the only Rolex that I would go after, because, you know, I've always talked about, you know, one of Rolex's irritants to me is just that you get a little bit in each watch, but you never get all of Rolex in one.
And a refusal to give you simple things. That's why I like about Omega. We have Glide Lock, we put it in all of them.
In all of them.
Quick set hour, you can have
Correct.
Rolex. Well, why would you ever need Glide Lock in a non-dive watch?
Right.
Really, we playing this game?
Yeah, and so that's where, you know, when I saw your Sky Dweller, and I thought to myself, I want a complicated movement from Rolex. I am a big fanboy of the Cyclops. I know people think that it kind of like busies up the dial. The fact that you can tell the date based off of this in such a very conservative way. I still love the Datejust and the traditional elements of a Datejust, that fluted bezel. I'm like, I get that, but one of my biggest challenges from the days when I had my first 2 or 3 Datejusts was I had it at 36, and I struggled with that size. And even though I don't have extremely large wrists, I'm a guy that's very comfortable wearing a 42 or even a 43 millimeter watch. And so I remember, I don't know if it was early last year, I was telling you the ultimate move on the Sky Dweller was to get a modified Rolex Jubilee bracelet added to it, right? Before they actually came out with the release. And once they did that, I was like, I'm sold. So
rumor is you're supposed to be able to get the Jubilee eventually. If you go into some dealers, they're like, well, Rolex wants the old bracelet back for silly reasons. But rumor has it you're supposed to be able to eventually get both, which would be huge, because I'd probably do that.
Because then I switch up. And now you can go sport or you can go dress, which I think at the end of the day, for me, that would be the ultimate grail goal.
When you talk about the size, I mean, it's 42. Again, I still think Rolex lies. So, I mean, their 42 feels like, you know, it probably should be on the 40 side. But, I mean, you know, it fits. The thing with, I love the Datejust, too. But that one's got the size to it. Yeah, I like to know I'm wearing a watch.
Yeah.
Even with smaller wrists.
So, let's talk a little bit about this one. Give me a little bit of the backstory of this watch and what also drew you to this piece here.
Yeah, so the Sea Dweller, so at the time now, we're like running into our chronological events. I think the only thing I have left is the Sky Dweller and the the GMT, the black GMT. So black GMT become somewhat redundant because you had the Sky Dweller, and then there's also the fact that now all I'm wearing is the Sky Dweller because we're running into that size issue again, 40 versus 42. I just prefer wearing the Sky Dweller. So I still want a second watch. I do like switching on the weekends from time to time. So I think we were at a local Red Bar event, and a gentleman had like every Sea Dweller ever made.
Yeah.
And that's where I tried that one on. Because my original thought was I had the Planet Ocean 43 and a half, and the Planet Ocean was much heavier than that one. So I was concerned as being 43, and it's always described as a brick. But no, that one I tried it on, wore really well. 43, again, Rolex kind of lies, so it probably fits like a 42, for being honest. So at that point, I knew I didn't want to pay too much more over sticker price than they had to. So because that one had been out for a while and it was controversial, they added the Cyclops back onto it. I was like, well, let me go see what I can do. So I went to probably 5 or 6 local IDs just asking. Most of them were like, well, would you like to start a relationship with something else? Like, no, not really. So finally I found one, and they're like, hey, put down 20%, we'll call you in 6 months. Like, all right, fine. And they called me like a week later.
Oh, wow.
That's how the GMT actually got sold. So I had to go and fund that one. So then that brings us full circle to where we're at right now. Yes.
My thing is, and I'm starting to kind of coin this as I begin to talk to other collectors, and this is with all due respect and giving Rolex their props. To me, Rolex is the most affordable, high-end luxury watch brand by far on the market. If you pull out a Sky Dweller that even today on the gray market could be going for, let's say, 30, you're just starting to enter the market for some of AP's watches, right? If you think about some of the German brands, right, Elong and Zona, and some of their movements and some of their watches, right? At the end of the day, a GMT Pepsi is coming in at just shy of 10 at retail, right? If you think about all the different models of watches that Rolex has, their provenance, their history, their collectability, right? Now their investment value, at the end of the day, there is no other luxury brand that is affordable in that respectful regard like a Rolex is. And if you're not a person that travels out the States, I mean, let's just be honest, in the States, you got a Rolex, you got it.
You've been to an airport, I mean, they're just all over the place. I mean, the people who are buying them, even the gold ones, they have the capital to buy other pieces. They landed here for a reason, So I don't ever think we're in a debate that like they make the best watch. There's no illusion that they make the best watch, the most complicated watch. But I do think they make the best one watch, and you're only going to have one.
Fair.
You can have one, and like that'll work.
Fair. It justifies why in some cases you can land in this state where you find 2 pieces that check all the marks, give you a certain level of satisfaction, carry that type of weight that you know what you have on your wrist, and why go beyond that? I mean, to your point, even then, knowing that these are now considered investment value pieces, it is one of the greatest two watch collections that I've seen. So, hey, thank you for joining us, man, and we'll talk to you soon.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.